The biggest question about every position on the Texans roster heading into the draft, plus someone tries to predict every pick the Texans will make. We'll talk about that a lot more. D'Amico Ryan speaking tomorrow. It's a big week.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop. Won't stop.
It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. I am Landry Locker. You can see me, hear me here throughout the week. 10:30 right here in the Locker Room, and we are 24 days away from the NFL draft. It is creeping up on us. Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans. I consider this to be the biggest draft, a very, very, very big draft for them, perhaps make or break when it comes to the era. The roster appears to be laid out despite getting as far as they have in recent in franchise history. The feel is that they kind of let it get away and did not maximize what they should have done last year. Maybe that had to do with the QB as much as anything. But this is a big draft for D'Amico and Caserio, who will be speaking in the coming days in Arizona at the owners' meetings, which is where Cody Stoots is, other half of SNL, which you see here right here on YouTube Monday through Friday at 4:00. I want to jump right into this. I also want to kind of localize one of the bigger choke jobs that we've seen in a long time in sports and bring it back to the Texans. We'll also look at the first attempt that I've seen at a 7-round mock draft. I know a lot of people like mock drafts. Someone did a 7-rounder, and I got to respect that. We got to look at that, see how you would feel about that if the Texans were to come away with what was, I guess, predicted, courtesy of Matt Miller of ESPN. But let's just jump right into this. The biggest questions about every single position for the Houston Texans, every position group, the biggest questions heading into the draft, with the draft factored in to the evaluation and how you do and don't feel about each position. Question number one is the quarterback, and we've talked a lot about this. How does CJ Stroud rebound from the end of the 2025 season? How does he rebound? Does he come back a better version of himself? Does he is more or less? How does he handle it? It's not an easy thing to handle. It's kind of part of the requirement of the job is you have to deal with more crap at quarterback and have more responsibility and more people talking about what you did and didn't do right than anything else. But how does CJ Stroud come away with that? That's really, at the end of the day, that's really what's going to decide the fate of this team. Like, we can break down the draft, we can break down everything, but at the end of the day, that's really what's going to decide is how does CJ Stroud come back? And we really won't know till the end of the season when he's in that position, unless it just completely unravels. But even in the roller coaster that was CJ Stroud, the Texans have had a good enough team, and CJ Stroud has performed well enough to where he's at least laid out an opportunity for him to be able to come up big or come up short in the postseason. So how does Stroud rebound from the end of the 2025 season? Really nothing groundbreaking there when it comes to that question. Next question, as we go to the running backs, it is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content, talking about the biggest questions at every position. Running back. The Texans are very insistent that they want to be able to run the ball. They insist we got to be able to run the ball better. And quite frankly, they're right. Now, are they trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, which is one of the things that they emphasized when they hired Nick Caley? Are they actually going to be able to run the ball? Now, what they've done is they've decided that they're going to bring in guys maybe whose best football is behind them. We'll have to see. they're going to bring in guys who are run blockers, guys who are run blocking guys first, as opposed to pass blocking. Last year, the Texans, they averaged 108.9 yards per game, which was bottom 10 to 12 in the league. The yards per carry was 3.9, which was the fourth worst in the league. So that says that there's a decent amount of volume and there's not much production. 3.9 yards per carry is god awful. The Texans were just one of 5 teams in the league to average less than 4 yards per carry. So you can say you want to run the ball. Will you be able to run the ball? Now, there's a number of things that go into this. There's a lot of people who say, well, you got to fix the offensive line, obviously. But the quality of running back also contributes to that. And the reality is, whatever Joe Mixon did, whether he flew when he wasn't supposed to fly, whether it was just a fluke process, whatever the hell happened with Joe Mixon, he was not able to play. And as a result, the quality of running back dipped down, despite the fact there was some decent stuff from Woody Marks, who now looks like he's headed to be RB2 or RB1B with David Montgomery, who's been running back 2 or 1B in Detroit. So you take 2 guys who, for the most part, were backup running backs at the start of last season. You combine them, and you hope you're going to be able to run the ball and not be one of the 5 worst, 10 worst, however you want to look at it, running teams in the entire NFL. So the running back question is, what's the split between Montgomery and Marks? What does that look like, and is it effective? I think they might add to this running back room. Like, when do they do that? Who knows? It's not a draft where you're probably drafting running backs too high. But what's the split between Montgomery and Marks? What does that look like? A lot of people have thrown out the possibility of drafting a running back on day 2. 99% of the time, I'm very, very in favor of that. With this running back class, don't know. Although someone who I really, really do respect when it comes to evaluation, he compared Jadarian Price of Notre Dame to Darren McFadden, who Darren McFadden is a top 10 pick. Probably didn't go according to plan, but if you're going to get Jadarian Price on day 2, and you're adding a guy like Darren McFadden in this mix, so be it. I'm not necessarily buying that comparison, but that was Sam Monson over there with Steve on the Check the Mic podcast. Next question. We get to the wide receivers. Now, Nico Collins is coming off 2 concussions last year. The last time we saw him on the field was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was leaving the game, and we never saw from him again until the Pro Bowl, where he was running around a little bit. We'll see what happens with Nico Collins, but I think we anticipate Nico Collins is still going to be a really good player. Now, behind Nico Collins, that's the question that we have. Last year in the draft, about a year ago today, year and a few weeks, the Texans went all in on wide receiver. They needed immediate contribution, and with the pick of Jalen Noel, it felt like they were looking at this upcoming season without knowing that Christian Kirk was going to be a complete non-factor. So the wide receiver question is, what's the next step for the second-year guys? Does Jaden Higgins look like a quality WR2? And does Jalen Noel look like someone that's a top-of-the-line receiver, which is when you take best player available? I know Nick Caserio says that he doesn't know what that means. But when you take the best player available, you think he can contribute at some point. Nick Caserio, though, doesn't know what that means.
This whole concept of drafting for need, honest to God, I don't even know what it means. I mean, what does it mean? If someone could tell me that, I'd love to hear it, but we don't look at it that way. We need to keep drafting good people, good football players that are going to enhance the overall culture of our building, and we're not going to stray from that.
All right, so there you go. So he doesn't know what that means. I think he probably does, but yeah. So what is the next step for the second-year guys? It would be very, very beneficial if they're good. I think we feel pretty good about Higgins. I think the The confidence level is kind of up and down, but I don't think anyone's too down. And with Jalen Noel, I mean, last year he wasn't able to get on the field. Was it because Christian Kirk was in the way? Was it because they were overanalyzing it? Who knows? I think both these guys will be okay. But what is the next step for those guys? It really could not necessarily decide the fate at as high of a level as CJ Stroud, but those guys got to be good. You got to get more from Jalen Noel than you did Christian Kirk last year, minus the one playoff game. You have to. A couple hundred yards is not going to fly for your one of your top wideouts. I did not put Tank Dell on there because I'm not even entertaining the possibility of really having to depend on Tank Dell. Although I do think that's a needle moving story that will get a lot of attention. Question about the tight ends is, will the depth be addressed? I think it's an issue. I think a lot of people think that it's an issue. I think Cade Stover, with how much Nick Caserio has liked Cade Stover, it's a little bit of an eye roll at this point based on what we've seen from Cade Stover. Maybe they're still comfortable with him. I would question significantly the evaluation of abilities of Nick Caserio if he felt 100% comfortable with Cade Stover. That's not to say that they should cut Cade Stover or that Cade Stover can't get better. But if you feel good about Cade Stover after what you've seen the last couple of years, specifically the last time we saw him on the field against New England, then, I mean, you're putting everyone in harm's way, because that version of Cade Stover, you're not even going 11 on 10, you're going 12 on 10, because it's basically a guy that's just in the way. And if a guy is disguised as someone who's supposed to help you and he's just in the way, that's not playing 10 verse 11. That's playing 10 verse 12. And that is what a large portion of the time, that's what Cade Stover's doing. He's getting in the way of the blocking. He's getting in the way of the receiving game. And he's out there on most days, 40% of the time. That's a problem. Now, Foster Moreau is someone they brought in. Maybe Foster Moreau is a serviceable tight end, but I think you need more than serviceable at this point. Brevin Jordan, we really don't know. There's 2 season-ending injuries since we didn't know. So you go back there. So will the tight end depth be addressed? I would think so. But again, Cade Stover is one of their favorites, and Brevin Jordan's one of their favorites. So I think you would have to address the tight end depth, but don't quote me on that, because Nick Caserio seems to have a really, really soft spot for Cade Stover. On the chat,
Swarm.
Cebu3519, it says, I wonder if anyone takes a shot at Mixon and if that leads us to finding out what happened. I don't think Joe Mixon's ready to play football, and I don't think Joe Mixon really is necessarily going to want that to be out. Maybe there's a point where he does some sort of interview and we figure out. At this point, the ship has kind of sailed. I just think it's probably, like, in my opinion, I think it's probably something that happened. Nothing too reckless, but maybe bad effects of some sort of procedure, maybe with the foot, whether it's the aftercare or something like that. That would be my guess. But yeah, that would be my guess. I also do think it's just as much of a Mixon thing as it is a Texans thing. But it's obviously something that he doesn't want out. They don't want out. And for the sake of it, though, I would be kind of interested to see how he handles it if he does play. Now, if he never plays again, maybe he goes on like the pivot or something like that and tells his story, and it's, whatever. But that's just kind of where it is there. As best as I can guess. Your guess is as good as mine at this point. They really haven't said anything. Now we go to the offensive line. Now, the offensive line is interesting because it's been one of the most polarizing positions, one of the most polarizing position groups in this organization. Not just in this era, but in the history of the Houston Texans, the offensive line has been one of the most polarizing things that we talk about on a consistent level. Now, this year, they addressed it. Now, how strongly did they address it? They spent a decent amount of money in free agency. Now, that's not always a recipe for success when it comes to fixing an offensive line. Guys are essentially overpaid in free agency more times than not. And these guys have probably their best days ahead of them. And some of the stuff that we've seen with Braden Smith and Wyatt Teller has not been fantastic in regards to the offensive line performance, specifically with Teller. So the question here, and we don't know how they're going to attack this in the draft, but the question is, how do the 2026 free agent moves fit in? What does Braden Smith look like? What does Wyatt Teller look like? And is it enough to feel comfortable with those guys being on the field and upgrading in both areas? I think Braden Smith is competing with Trent Brown for the right tackle spot. I don't think they're just going to hand that to him. And Wyatt Teller, we haven't seen him play left guard. He hasn't played left guard in the NFL. So how do these guys fit? The history of the Texans when it comes to free agency and the offensive line, the Caserio, it's hit or miss. A lot of times less is more. But there was no neglect. Now, as far as playing left guard, let's hear what Teller said when Seth Payne asked him about playing left guard. He went pretty in depth, and this was where we really got the confirmation that he is, in fact, going to be a left guard, and he is, in fact, anticipating the adjustment, I guess you can say, back to left guard, because he did it very early in his NFL career and in college. But I think it's just kind of a fresh start.
I was left guard all throughout college. And then my first year started 7 games in Buffalo at left guard. And then I get moved to, get traded to Cleveland. And they had a pretty good left guard there who was already a Pro Bowler and all pro and Joel Bitonio. So I don't think I was going to play much left guard. But moved to right guard, had some growing pains those first years because you're just relearning. It's like writing with your right hand and writing with your left hand, right? You can learn it, but it's going to take some time. But then, under, Bill Callahan, everything like that, really just doing the reps a million times. I've learned a couple things throughout that to, be able to make the transition a little bit easier. But that being said, you're right. You're going to have to relearn. I'm not kicking with my right foot back anymore. I'm going to kick with my left. That being said, there's times where, if we're working against a one technique or something like that, my naturally your post foot drops back. So it's not like I haven't been in a left-handed stance or left guard pass protecting stance for too long. But even I was talking to Ethan Posick I think it was last night or the night before, and he was like, Wyatt, I think you're going to make this transition easy because naturally when I go to a hop, my left foot drops and it's my post foot, and I feel like I have a lot of strength in my post side that now is going to transition to my right. But also like just the wear and tear of football. I feel like so long I've been throwing that, right hand that now it's like now I can use that left hand with a strong catch hand. And it's not like my left hand isn't strong. I'm just saying it's just usually a little different. But no, I'm excited to work with Coach Pop and, just relearn how to do it, but also at the same time, just helping any way I can. And, I've pulled, pulling and stuff like that, where it's like I pulled out of right-handed stance. But at the end of the day, even if we have a, O pull across the center or a G pull play side, being able to, just open the hip and turn, I've been able to do both ways for my entire career. So, there's going to be a little bit weird putting my left hand in the ground at first, but, football is a weird sport in general. You gotta learn how to do it from a 2-point, from a 3-point. So it's all going to work out.
Yeah. I was convinced that he's definitely doing it. I don't know that I'm convinced. It doesn't sound like he's like overly convinced that it's going to be an easy thing. Felt like there was a lot of, what do kids say? Coping. I don't think it was like dramatic coping, but it does feel like there's a lot of, well, but this, but that, trying to look on the bright side. But he's definitely playing that. So that's the offensive side of it. We'll get to the defensive side of it in a sec. Before that, though, let's talk about the greatness of Ace Outdoor Solutions. Zach, he does this thing. You look in your backyard. You own a home. You want to maximize it. you don't even know where to start. A lot of these companies are stock companies. You basically point in a magazine, you give them a number, they come in, they do it. They don't pay much attention. They don't really care. They're pretty much robots. It's not what Zach is. Zach has a vision, and he wants to put your vision to practice. He's gonna help you along the way. Whether you want the outdoor custom patio covering to where you can watch games or just relax out there, grill, whatever. Your dream outdoor kitchen, he's got you covered. Hot tub, got you covered. Pool, got you covered. Fence, got you covered. Anything you want to do to maximize your backyard and take advantage of this awesome weather that we have in Texas, and increase your home value and all that, be able to host, be able to just chill. Whether you just want to chill, you want to be with the family, you want to have somewhere to get away, he's got you covered. And if you look at the work at Ace Outdoor Solutions, it's absolutely fantastic. He's a Texans fan just like you. He's a viewer/listener of SNL in the locker room just like you. You see it. Sometimes you just wonder, can it be done? It can be done. Zach will do it for you. So get a free quote at 346-237-0573. Go to aceoutdoorsolutions.com and let Zach do for you whatever you want when it comes to your backyard. All right, defense. Biggest question at every position. Now, the offense is obviously the concern. So those are very, very pressing questions. The CJ Stroud question, the offensive line question, the tight end. Those are very pressing questions, some more pressing than others. But then we get to the superpower. We get to the specialty of D'Amico, no O, and we go to the defense. And this is much more encouraging. You're almost like filling in holes. You're adding depth at defense. That's kind of the goal. And we'll hear from D'Amico Ryans, by the way, tomorrow. He's going to speak at the owners' meetings in the morning. The quotes, they'll be making the rounds. There are 3 Texans reporters on the scene right now. Just three. And the Chronicle doesn't even send multiple people to like playoff games. So don't think too much of that. The Jonathan Alexander is the man on the scene. They don't even send multiple football reporters to playoff games. They typically send just JA, and they might add like someone else that doesn't really cover football. But Jonathan Alexander is there. The Alpha's there.
Hey, bro. Alpha Aaron here.
And Stoots. Those are the 3. So if you need to follow along for the news, I know the Alpha's going to cram it. Shout out to the Alpha. He did some good work today when it comes to localizing. He localized. He talked to Dan Campbell about Montgomery. Like he was grinding, doing his thing. JA's doing his thing. I'm sure he'll have some good stuff with Hannah and Cal. And then Cody Stoots is going to be on the scene with D'Amico. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So we will hear from D'Amico Ryans tomorrow. First time he's spoken since the end of the season. I'm sure he'll be a very real joy to hear from and give a lot of information. If we know D'Amico, that's definitely what's going to happen. So the offense, let's get to the defense. Let's get to D'Amico defense. Brandon asks, is Mr. Myaz out there? I don't know. You'll have to ask Z Alpha on that.
Hey, bro. Alpha Aaron here.
Can't even give my man a compliment without this going down.
Definitely Swarm. I think he would fit in.
Damn shame with the Alpha. The defense, when it comes to questions about that, we'll start on the inside and we'll work our way out. We're going to start on the D-line. The beauty of the Texans D-line is you're elite on the edge with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Best in the league, best edge duo in the league. Not even close. And on the interior, it feels like it just doesn't matter who's in there. Now, sometimes it's worse than others. There was a stretch in the season where the depth was just insanely concerning after you lost Tim Settle, after you lost Edwards. It was extremely discouraging, but you kind of picked that up and it didn't last long. And it feels like the Texans are able to do whatever they want when it comes to developing guys on the D line. So on the D line, the question is very simple, and we're gonna talk about the DTs. What piece or pieces will be added? They're drafting a defensive lineman. They're drafting an interior defensive lineman. They might draft an edge guy. They still kind of need to figure out what they're going to do with that Derek Barnett role. But at DT, it seems inevitable that they're going to draft at least one guy. And with where they're drafting, specifically at 28 and 38, and we'll see what Matt Miller had in his 7-round ESPN mock draft. Spoiler alert, I haven't looked at this either. So I'm looking at this for the first time with you, and we'll react to what he thinks the Texans can and will do. But what pieces will they add? I think the beauty of this is D'Amico Ryans right now is probably studying defensive linemen as much as any other position. And there's a chance that he's going to have to decide between 4, 5, 6 guys in that 28, 38 range based on what we're talking about. And if someone else emerges above those guys, I think you got a lot of confidence in the evaluation of the D line, because D'Amico Ryans has a pretty good track record of getting the most out of guys, whether it's guys on the back end of their careers like Sheldon Rankins, Tommy Togiai, who really hadn't done much in the league until he got here. And then, the rotational guys, even Tim Settle and Mario Edwards. He prolonged Mario Edwards' already long career by moving him and playing him more inside. And Tim Settle used his experience here and got another payday. So what DT pieces will be added? I could see edge added in the draft. And I think that's obvious, but I could see it being added relatively early, depending on how that goes. But yes, that's D-line. What piece will they add? Now, linebacker, will they add some upside to the linebacker position? Look, Christian Harris, I don't know if the 2023 version of Christian Harris exists. If it did, it's hard for me to imagine that it wouldn't have been on the field last year in some way, shape, or form. I don't think D'Amico Ryans believes it exists, and I think D'Amico Ryans would have a good idea. And quite frankly, I think D'Amico Ryans did a disservice to Christian Harris by not just coming out and saying that he had a surgery when he clearly did in the middle of the 2024 season. I think he kind of just made it seem like the guy had like a hangnail or something like that. And rather than taking the opportunity to say, look, his injury is a little worse, we had a setback, we hope to have him back. I think he was a little bit too secretive, and I think he did a very big disservice to the young man. That's neither here nor there. Bottom line is, what was exciting about Christian Harris last year was, while you have To'o and you have Azeez Al-Shire, you felt like perhaps you had a linebacker in Christian Harris that had some upside. EJ Speed's a fine backup linebacker. I think he's fine. But it's not long-term, and the upside's not necessarily up here. We know what EJ Speed is. Like, the arrow is not pointing up. It's solid. It's not necessarily pointing down, but it's there. But when you have two guys that are starting at linebacker that are in the final years of their contracts, you would like to have at the linebacker position a young guy with some sort of upside. Now, is that something that they do early? Is that something that they do later? Who knows? But they need upside at linebacker. It needs to be added. You have some solid guys, but you need some more to where when Azeez Al-Shire is out, it shouldn't stick out as much as it did against the Raiders. So will it be added? There's a lot of possibilities to do that in the draft. It's just a matter of whether or not you think that adding that is more beneficial than some of the other positions they'll need, which is basically just the overall concept of the draft.
Swarm.
Evan says, Landry, do we like Brazel from Tennessee? Brazel from Tennessee makes me feel really old because I remember his dad back in the day. Chris Brazel Sr. He's from the state of Texas. He's from Midland. He's actually a guy who played for Willie Fritz at Tulane. Look, if you're talking about wide receiver, I think he's probably going to be in the range of where, if they're going to take a wide receiver, it may happen. So I think they could use speed. I think they kind of value NFL pedigree when it comes to the fact that his dad did play. I would not be opposed to adding a young guy with some speed. I don't know how they feel about the return of Tank Dell. I think last year they kind of told us how they felt with drafting 2 wide receivers. How do they feel this year? Who knows? But I think it would be wise later on in the draft. I think someone in the chat said last week you should draft a wide receiver and a corner every year. I completely agree with that. So yeah, I think that Brazel's intriguing. They do need speed. And I like that he played for Willie Fritz before transferring over there to Tennessee. Next question. As we go through the biggest questions at every position for the Texans, we go to safety. Now, safety, it feels like they're pretty set. You added Blankenship, and you already have Kalen Bullock. You have a guy who you drafted last year in Jalen Reed, and you have a veteran that D'Amico likes that did a good job filling in last year when given the opportunity to start in MJ Stewart, who also happens to be a really good special teams player. So you have kind of a balance of everything when it comes to safety, and we can also throw Jalen Petrie, who we put into his own category as a safety. But the question I have here, and this is the ultimate optimism, because unlike the end, D-line, linebacker, I feel pretty good about the safety depth. Will the position be as good as expected? I think this is going to has potential to be one of the best safety duo in Texans history. This is a guy in Blankenship who's going to provide D'Amico with something that he's been kind of seeking out the last couple of years, another safety to put out there to roam the field. Jimmy Ward, father time caught up to him, and he wasn't able to be out there. And then you had the CJ Gardner-Johnson disaster where just wasn't really necessarily a good fit here, although he did kind of land on his feet in Chicago. I think this is going to be a really, really good position. I think it's top to bottom, depth-wise, before the draft. That can easily change. I think it's probably the one that you feel the best about. So I think the safety position is going to be good, really good, probably great. You never know, though, till you actually see it play out. I probably think most of us, including myself, thought that CJ Gardner-Johnson would add a nice element. Didn't fit. Wasn't necessarily able to work with Petrie being close to the line of scrimmage, and may or may not have voiced his frustration about that. Blankenship's a guy who has experience working with someone who plays close to the line of scrimmage. So I don't think it'll be too big of a problem for him when it comes to accepting that role and figuring that out. So will they be as good as advertised is the safety question. Then we go to cornerback. This one's simple. Like, you don't feel great, or you didn't feel great at the end of last season about the cornerback depth. And the reason why was because Tremont Smith, who's been a special teams contributor for the large majority of his career, and that's pretty much why he's in the NFL. He's not in the NFL because of how good he is at corner. He's a good special teams guy. Serviceable corner at times, sometimes more serviceable than others. Last year, it was kind of apparent that when he was on the field, he was going to be sniffed out and he was going to be taken advantage of. And you can look at the Chargers game as soon as Kamari Lassiter limped off the field before he limped back out as an example of that. But lost in that was the fact that, much like the previously mentioned Kalen Bullock, they traded up for Jalen Smith the year after, and they expected him to be the number 3 corner. In camp, there were some good moments for Jalen Smith. There were some growing pains for Jalen Smith. There were times where he would line up outside and they would bump Kamari Lassiter inside, and they need a CB3. They need a cornerback 3, not CB4. Underrated movie with Chris Rock, if you haven't seen it. One of my favorites, by the way. Very underrated, but they need a CB3. And the question is very simple. Is Jalen Smith any good? Because if he's not, it could be a big problem. I know Derek Stingley has the longest consecutive game streak right now on the team. I know Kamari Lassiter is a dog, and you basically have to protect him from himself to keep him off that football field. But Jalen Smith is going to need to play, whether Lassiter and Stingley are out there or not. And if they miss some time, he's going to have to play, and he's going to have to play well because they really, really liked him. And we got to see what that looks like and how he performs with at the cornerback position. It's going to be interesting. And I think it would be somewhat telling if on day 2 we see them take a corner. Now, maybe it just means that you're adding even more depth because you probably do need the CB4 on top of the CB3. But it would be pretty disappointing if we see the Texans trade up for Jalen Smith and then he's not able to at least be good enough to where at the worst case scenario, he goes through the growing pains that come with a cornerback getting playing time his first year in the NFL. But is he any good? Going to be kind of underrated aspect of the DB and the defense. I think a lot of people, I don't fault you for it, have forgotten that dude was even on the team based on what we did and for the majority of did not see last season. So is Jalen Smith any good is when it comes to the corner. So that's the defense. We've already done the offense. Biggest question. We're going to go to special teams. And we're going to talk about the punter. We're getting really deep in the sticks here. Pause. But are they okay at punter? Tommy Townsend was kind of up and down. There were times where he was shanking it. There were times where he looked better than others. But now Tommy Townsend, you'll be going against him a couple of times a year because he is in Tennessee. He is going to be rocking the Oilers jerseys. He's going to be in Tennessee. Tommy Townsend no longer with us. And they traded for pick swap the Saints, Paul Kruger. Are they okay at punter? Could we see the Texans draft a punter in this draft, or do they feel okay with statistically one of the bottom 3-4 worst punters in the NFL last year? Now, maybe there's some sort of gray area. I will say at the mini camp last season, he was punting pretty well. Left-footed punter, but with the Saints, he was not. Now, maybe there's some sort of gray area, and he arrives here and he looks good. But the reality is, if you're dependent on your defense, you probably need a punter who's decent, especially with the high-pressure situations that the Texans face. So are they okay at punter? Are they comfortable with bringing in Kroger, however the hell you want to pronounce it? We'll say Kruger for the moment. If he starts punting well, we'll figure out the pronunciation. I think it's Kruger. Are they okay at punter, or do they decide to move? Seems like a small thing, kind of something you roll your eyes at until your punter sucks. Tommy Townsend did not consistently suck. He was more times than not pretty good. Texans decide they're going to bring in one of the worst statistical punters in the league last year. How will that look? And then the bonus question that we have as we go through every position before we get to this mock is, how much longer will Kaimi Fairbairn be elite? Now, they extended him. They gave him the contract extension. How much longer will Kaimi Fairbairn be elite? Kickers, typically, they naturally fall off in their late to mid 30s. I think the golden age, like if you're looking at kickers who've kind of dropped off, is like 33, 34. Fairbairn's not quite there yet. And the only reason that this is getting brought up is not because I don't believe in Kaimi Fairbairn. It's just because of how dependent the Texans are on their kicker. Now, Kaimi just turned 32 years old, so we're kind of creeping towards that. I don't think this is something that you anticipate. I think this is something that whenever it happens, and you suffer the consequences and you adjust accordingly. But how much longer will we be elite? Like we saw it with Harrison Butker. Harrison Butker was like the best kicker in the league, and all of a sudden he fell off. We've seen it with Mike Vanderjag. We've seen it with Justin Tucker, and it's not always right in front of you. Harrison Butker's right now 30. He was all world, and then all of a sudden he started kicking the ball all over the place. So what does it look like with Fairbairn? How much longer is he going to be elite? And maybe the Texans get to a point where they're better in the red zone, where they're not as dependent. But when a kicker is setting records for most field goals kicked, and it feels like a lot of times the Texans are damn near settling for 50-yarders, how much longer will Fairbairn be elite, and what does that look like when he's not? I would anticipate it being this year, but quite frankly, some of the previously mentioned names that we threw out there, I didn't necessarily anticipate it then either. So how much longer will Fairbairn be elite? That's the bonus. So those are the biggest questions about each position heading into the draft. Really nothing too crazy. The quarterback is really the thing that's going to decide it. And other than that, there's some encouraging things. And there's at the very least, the stuff that you're concerned about, there's some new things, and sometimes new, especially on the offensive line. Like at least there's options and at least changes are being made. We're going to get to this mock draft in a sec. First, I kind of want to localize something that happened yesterday. And I think most of you watch March Madness. Some of you don't. Some of you are just football. But March Madness yesterday, Duke and UConn. Duke chokes. They give up damn near a 20-point lead. Buzzer beater, bad play at the end by Boozer. And as I always do, because this is a Texans channel, I tend to take stuff in sports, stuff in life, and I localize it, which brings me to the hack question of the day. What was the bigger 2026 choke? Was it Duke or was it CJ Stroud? Which one was the bigger choke? Was it CJ Stroud, the stretch from Pittsburgh where he was bailed out, all the way to New England where he was not? Or was it Duke? Which choke was worse? To me, I will say from a team perspective, it's got to be Duke. There's plenty of blame to pass around when you blow a lead like that late in the game. Now, a lot of people will point to the one play that one of the Boozer twins made to try to force the pass, which resulted in the 3-pointer. And I do think that was a bad play, but for the most part, that guy was pretty solid in the entire tournament. So it's kind of a one-off. It would be like if CJ Stroud played decent in the playoffs and then had just one interception. We've seen that a lot. We've seen that with Josh Allen. We've seen that with Brett Favre. We've seen that with some of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, where you play well and then you make that one mistake and we kind of emphasize it. So from an individual perspective, I would say CJ's choke was worse. And I would also say that while the Texans, after CJ's performance, were saying it's a team game, we lose as a team, I think if you watch that game in New England, it was pretty obvious that they lost that game because of how CJ Stroud played and what his performance was. So from a team perspective, I would say the Duke choke was worse. From an individual perspective, I think it's CJ Stroud. It's not really even close. Tomato, who knows? That's a little localized hackage here on the locker room. Curtis says Duke. Yeah, I would say team-wise for real. Roll Zone says Carlos Boozer related. Yeah, those are twins. Those are his kids. King Don says what CJ did was treason. And then Brandon has the dad joke. And he says they were dookie. So was CJ, though. If we're being completely honest. All right, so I like mock drafts every once in a while. And I respect the effort to do a 7-round mock draft, which is why I'm somewhat intrigued by Matt Miller's ESPN 7-round mock draft. Now, I have not looked at this. I just want to see what he has the Texans getting. And I kind of want to react to this. I'll do a couple mock drafts leading up to the draft. Just not really my vibe as much as it is Stoots. We'll do some SNL ones as well. By the way, the SNL draft party announcement coming up in the next couple of days. We want to see you there. It's going to be on the 25th, Saturday the 25th. There's going to be a lot of stuff to do, a lot of stuff going on. So we look forward to seeing you there. We'll be at Spanky's as well. We just got to decide if we go day of or day after. So round 1 in Matt Miller's mock, let's just kind of go through this. He has, as I've said, the Tennessee Titans taking Jeremiah Love. I think this is what I would bet on at this point. I think it's an inevitable that Jeremiah Love goes to Tennessee and will be in the division. Now, I don't know how that makes you feel. Positional value people may just say, okay, well, that's not good. But I think they're trying to surround Cam Ward with as much as possible. I think Jeremiah Love goes to Tennessee. Matt Miller believes the same thing. Then we keep going down. The thing that sticks out here, Cincinnati, and we'll look at this through localized in the first round. Cincinnati's defense has been a problem for a while. I think they have 75, 80% of the losses in the NFL the last couple of years when you score 35 or more points. If they get Sonny Styles, I think there's a chance they're getting the best defensive player in this draft. Now, him sliding to 10 would just be a gift, much like we felt like Tyler Warren was last year for the Colts. I still think that's a good pick. Didn't look as crazy given how Loveland looked for the Bears. But Sonny Styles falling to the Bengals, a team that I guess you can't say they're in the Texans level, but they're trying to take that next step, and that division is wide open. So we go down. Kenyon Sadiq is a guy that people would hope would fall to the Texans. Miller has him going 14 to the Ravens. Would make sense. They just lost likely. Mark Andrews not getting any younger. CJ Allen of Georgia. Todd Bowles is a defensive guy. Some wonder if he fell, if the Texans would be inclined to do so. He goes off the board. And then you're seeing some tackles and some wide receivers, which you don't think the Texans are necessarily in the market for too much. Maybe tackle, and then safety. This one would suck because I think once he fell to 19, I think Viega out of Penn State is a guard who a lot of people really, really like. Him being there at 28 seems like a long shot, and he goes maybe even a little bit later than anticipated, 19 to block for Bryce Young. Caden Proctor is a guy that Stoots isn't very high on, out of Alabama, kind of one of those dark horse potential picks for the Texans. Doesn't necessarily happen. Messidor, another guy who you could see the Texans taking. Defensive line coach Rod Wright. He goes 23 to Philadelphia. Defensive line coach Rod Wright actually coached him when he was a freshman at Miami a long time ago. And he's 25 years old. But Matt Miller mentions that and says he's pro ready. So there's that. So we go down to 25. There you go. Peter Woods ends up in Chicago with the Bears. Not a guy who had the best senior year. I thought the analogy that Travis, who listens to us and watches us at A&M, talking about him being Luther Burden, I thought it was a good analogy. Had a bad senior year. We were talking about wide receivers last year. Some people not as high on Burden because of the senior year. What if Peter Woods ends up looking like Burden did? And it would be appropriate if he goes to Chicago, where the Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls are the top headline on ESPN right now. Not for anything that happened on the court. But the Chicago Bears, much like they did with Burden, they take Woods. And if they're able to reap the benefits, would be nice. So then we go to 28. Now, this one would hurt because Lamu out of Utah is a guy who's willing to play center. He's willing to play pretty much every position. Now, San Francisco, obviously, Trent Williams not getting any older, and there's talk about the contract and what will they do, how will they handle it. San Francisco takes him right in front of the Texans, which leads the Texans to take an offensive tackle in Blake Miller out of Clemson. Now, Miller notes that the Texans are old at tackle, right tackle specifically, with Braden Smith and Trent Brown. Talks about Miller, who started 54 games at right tackle, improved every season, allowed only 2 sacks last season, 34-inch arms. We know that they care about the long arms and the measurables, and a strong base to block from. Solid starter, high-end potential as he develops his run blocking talents. So that would be the first pick. How would that make you feel if the Texans went tackle? I think a lot of people would be excited. Some people would kind of wonder, okay, now what are we going to get at DT? Now, notice there's a couple of names at DT that we've been talking about that have not gone in the first 28. So Caden McDonald out of Ohio State, who is probably the most popular name at 28. He's still there. I don't think we saw Banks go out of Florida unless I missed it. Let's see. Banks out of Florida with the injured foot. We have not seen that yet. And we also haven't seen Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. So this is what would happen. They would conclude the next round. You still wouldn't have. All right, Caleb Banks goes to the Patriots. So you cross him off the list. And then at 32, Kedrick Falk, who's another guy that people would be anticipating. He goes off. And then we go to sleep. And then round 2 begins. So we fast forward to the second round and notice that Ty Simpson goes at the start of the second round. Now, if Ty Simpson were on the clock, are still on the board at the end of day 1, I think a lot of people would say, well, trade back, trade back, trade back. And if the Jets do like Ty Simpson, there's a chance that the Texans, especially with what we just saw, could maybe trade back 5 spots and pick up an extra that second and maybe an extra third and stock up even more picks in day 2, which we've seen them do. So the way this thing's playing out, the DT, the intrigue, it's there. You end up going O-line, and then there's all types of possibilities. So I think a lot of these are realistic scenarios. I would think that the Jets would be open to perhaps trading up if this were going to be the case. Now we go to the Texans, and boom, you get Caden McDonald right there at 38, a guy that you like at 28. Now, Miller says that he's an ascending prospect whose best football is ahead of him. He had high-end production from the middle of the line, posting 3 sacks last season on only 223 passing downs. He would primarily ankle the middle of the line for Houston's powerful defense, but McDonald has the all-around potential to become an elite one-tech or nose. See, for me, this is why I like McDonald at 28. I think if this happened, that would be great, but I just don't know how you pass on this if you're sitting at 28, if you're the Texans. No harm, no foul, though. I just don't see how you pass on this with everything that's there. And a lot of people will say, well, he only played 223 pass downs. Ohio State is a school where you have blue chips. You have a lot of guys that you're kind of shuffling on the field. I think McDonald would be my pick at 28, but you end up getting him at 38. So we keep going forward right there. After that, a couple of names. If you're trying to get greedy that we've talked about, tight end would probably be what we would be talking about at this point. Zachariah Branch is a wide receiver who I like. He goes 42. Eli Stowers out of Vandy goes 43. So that eliminates that possibility. The linebackers are coming off. Anthony Hill Jr., he's gone. The edge, there's kind of an edge run going on here. Jadarian Price gone at 49. So we go down with the how about Nessmeyer going 53? That would be funny. That would be a funny Mike McCarthy. Jacob Rodriguez in the division in Jacksonville. I know that'd make a lot of people upset. And then we go to 59, and look at this. Another guy that we've been mentioning. This is an interesting mock draft because Matt Miller has Pregnon and McDonald going to the Texans, but he has it at 38 and 59 instead of 28 and 38. I think there's some people who would say my elite 28 and 38 is Pregnon and McDonald. He has Pregnon and McDonald, but he has it 38 and 59. I think you would be okay with this. It does seem like maybe Pregnon is kind of getting pigeonholed as a result of age and lack of flexibility. But I think if you had this through 59, regardless of the order, I think you'd be good with Pregnon and McDonald, or at least many people would. So you like that. Then you go to round 3, and this would be the last of day 2. Jake Gaudet out of Cincinnati, really good linebacker. I think D'Amico Ryans would be a big fan of this. Now, this was as a result of the Jackson Dart trade last year. Probably should have gotten a little more with the QB tags, but you end up adding a guy who you would think would be a long-term starter and might even be able to push toe-to-toe depending on what he looks like. Gaudet, he has the length that they like. He's pretty massive linebacker, and he can stop the run, which is something that they've emphasized that they want to do. So you're talking about getting a 6'5", 235-pound, 239-pound linebacker. EJ Speed is a guy who's really, really tall out there. This guy's even taller. But this would be a good draft thus far with what Matt Miller's got. Then we go down. We're concluding day 3. We're going to get to, or day 2, I should say. We're going to get to where the Texans are at. Matt Miller's not getting too crazy and making trades. That would just be insane if we're doing that. There's Brazel, who a lot of people were talking about. He ends up going. And then the Jags, my gosh. Jags kind of feel, if the Jags did this and they came away with Jacob Rodriguez, TJ Hall out of Iowa, and then at the end of day 2, they added Emmett Johnson, the running back out of Nebraska after ETN. I think we would say, damn, the Jags, despite the fact that they gave up too much for Travis Hunter and they basically went with that F them picks mentality, the Jags ended up making it out all right. If they get Emmett Johnson and Jacob Rodriguez on day 2. So good for them. Then we go to day 3, and this will be on the 25th when SNL is having their party. We want you to be there. We'll give you the announcement tomorrow. We'll give you one announcement, then we'll give you the location on Wednesday. Still haven't gotten your tight end. You see Delp coming off the board to Kansas City relatively early. You go down to the Texans here. There's no 4th round pick, so you kind of got to sit around. You're partying don't want to say, but there. And then we have the first pick of the 5th round. You get your edge out of Tennessee and Joshua Josephs, someone that maybe D'Amico Ryans thinks he can work with. Do you think he can contribute immediately? I can't confidently say that. And then you get a safety out of Oklahoma. So you add even more safety depth with Robert Spears-Jennings. That would be the second time in as many years that you added a safety. Probably pretty good value around this area in the draft. Last year you did it with Jalen Reed. You feel good about him. And you add Robert Spears-Jennings out of Oklahoma. Quite frankly, at this point, I think Miller's just kind of throwing darts, which if you're doing a 7-round mock, I ain't mad at you. Still no tight end, though, which I think would make people a little bit, and by people, I mean myself, a little bit uneasy about the state of that position. So it's an important position in this offense. But then we go to the end of the draft. This is when you're getting a lot of comps. They kick the tires on a wide receiver, Eric McAllister out of TCU. I do think it's possible they draft a wide receiver on day 3, and there you go. So the beauty of that is the Texans get their 2 of the guys that people like, not necessarily the same path. It's damn near impossible to pick 7-round draft. I do respect Matt Miller's efforts, and I don't anticipate that there's too many people outside of Houston that really think that tight end is as much of a pressing need with this offense as it is. But I think if you watch this, and I'm definitely speaking from not a biased POV, but from a POV of someone who watches every snap of this thing, I think that tight end should be way up there when it comes to the needs. But I wouldn't expect Matt Miller to think or even know that. It doesn't really stick out too much. They probably just look at Dalton Schultz, look at the fact that Cade Stover is a young guy who they drafted a few years ago, and there you go. But yeah, that would be a solid draft if it did happen. It would be an interesting path to that. But that's really the point of mock drafts. I don't think too many guys are trying to call their shots. I think it's just laying out the path, and that would be exciting. D'Amico Ryans speaks tomorrow. He's going to break his silence. He just there hasn't been any availability. He's not like hiding. But if he could hide, he probably would. Maybe he'll provide some insight. We'll put those odds at 3-1. If he provides some insight, probably just a bunch of generic stuff with the Caserio influence and keeping it close to the vest. Although I don't think D'Amico wears a vest, but who knows? He copies Caserio enough at the podium. Maybe next thing you know, D'Amico is going to be in a vest. Biggest questions about all the players, the draft, the 7-round exercise. I don't think too many people would be upset about that. SNL tomorrow at 4. We'll react to D'Amico. We'll do the same right here at 10:30. Appreciate y'all for rolling through. Subscribe, like, right along. Join us at the draft party. Announcement coming in 2 days. And always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for rolling through.
Yeah, we top 2 and we not too plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know where we.